It's April 15th, and we were saying to buy the stock market after April 14th. We're saying, wait now. There's a good chance that the market may go lower, not because the time cycles are wrong, but because there are several different possible ways that the market can do what it wants to do. Our momentum oscillator was saying, and still is saying, the market could go lower before it's finished going down here. So we're not going to be buying yet. And the reason we're making this recording now is to let you know that beforehand, before Monday. And if you have, you should be very cautious going forward. If you want to get out of the long position that you got into, then do so. But we're going to wait at least until the 20th, which is the next low point cyclically. And if it doesn't go down to the 4,100 area on the S&P, we'll wait until the 25th of April. We do think there will be a rally coming, and we do think it will start soon. However, the price didn't go down enough, and it should still continue lower into the 4,100 area roughly in the S&P. If it does so, then, I would feel comfortable going long. And until it does so, I would not feel comfortable going long. Okay? All right, that's the update in terms of the short term. The long-term stuff's basically the same. We're seeing that the 1988 market, we had January 7th lining up with January 7th of 88 lining up with April 11th of 2022. And it does have a slightly different variation, which continues lower after a little bit of choppiness next week. It goes lower until the 24th or 25th of the equivalent of the 24th or 25th of April this year. So we still could have another continuation further on the downside. Also, what's interesting about that January of 1988 is that we had the same situation with the perpendicular, the square between Saturn and Rahu, almost exactly in line with what we just had on April 11th, came out there January 3rd of 88. So there's evidence astrologically to consider that as a meaningful point. I also want to mention, going back to the Saturn-Rahu combinations every 11.4 years, looking into history, it turns out to be extremely significant. If you look back to 1908, it was a major low. In the 1919 area, it was a major low. 1930, it was a major high. 1942 was a major low area. 1953, it was a major low area. 1965, it was a major topping area. 1976 was a major topping area. It looks like 1988 actually was a bottoming area, even though short term it's behaving the same way. The market did go up after that, but it took a few years, remember, before the stock market got out of the doldrums. 1988 was boring. 1989 started to go up. There was a big decline in 1990, retesting the bottoming area. So it took about 3 years, even in a bullish scenario. And we are not in a bullish scenario now. So, and so this particular time, after 1999, we get to 2020, we get to 2010 was a low area, and now 2022 is very likely to be a topping area. It doesn't always turn on a dime. It doesn't always turn on that day. It can even be weeks left or right of that point. But what was interesting, if you look at a weekly chart, there were very clearly significant major pivots. Also, if you look at the only time that the Saturn and Rahu positions were not only square, but in the same location in the zodiac that they are now, you have to go back to 1874. In 1874, you had Saturn in Capricorn and Rahu in Aries, as we have now, at a 90-degree angle. Guess what happened then? You had what was called the Long Depression. Started in 1873 and went all the way to 1878. So it also lines up with the possibility of a 3 or longer year bear market, which is emphasized by other cycles as well. Another interesting fact, which we're going to make a video on our history channel, is that many events in history that are extremely interesting line up with this Saturn-Rahu square. Most recently, we have the Ukraine war, where the Ukrainians are doing incredible resistance and even throwing the Russian influence off in Kyiv, which nobody expected. And the spirit of Zelensky and some of these Ukrainians is remarkable in terms of their vehement wanting to uphold their freedom and their territory, which again was beyond what most people expected. What was interesting is the same combination happened 600 years ago, almost to the day, when Joan of Arc went out onto the field of battle at Orléans in France, and with her influence and her spirit actually turned the tide of the 100 Years' War, which the British had been winning for at least 15 years consistently. The French were very demoralized prior to that. She walks out on the field on April 14th of 1729, April 29th of 1729. The event, the square aspect, Saturn square aspect, Rahu, happened on April 28th, 1429, exactly in line with what just happened 593 years earlier. And again, the spirit of the French soldiers was transformed, and they threw off the siege of Orleans, and the British left in the same way that the Russians just left Kyiv. And that doesn't mean the war is over, and certainly it didn't end then, and it wasn't all that a happy ending for Joan of Arc. But nevertheless, it was known that her time there was known to have influenced the future of the 100 Years' War, so that it turned the corner and eventually would end and translate into another phase of, actually kind of a very positive phase for the world. That was another time. There were other times in history, including, well, we'll talk about that later. All right. Thanks for this. This is Easter week. Today's Good Friday. It's also the beginning of Passover. So it's a special week. It's around holidays that markets often make pivots as well. But this one, I think, will take a few more days before the market settles into a place where it's ready to go up. All right. Thanks a lot.